Hey guys, in just 11 days, the world's largest arena for sports and collectibles is back in New York City. Catch the return of FANATICS Fest from June 20th to the 22nd, where you could share the floor with the biggest names in sports. That means appearances by over 500 iconic athletes and celebrities from your favorite teams, including current and former New York Knicks legends, plus live panels and podcasts, exclusive merch collabs, a trading card area with 200 of the biggest dealers in the biz, and way, way more. Get your tickets today using the link in the description of this Knicks Film School episode you're either watching or listening to, and get 20% off your ticket price with promo code Knicks Film School 20. A great offer that has been extended until the opening day of FANATICS Fest on June 20th. Again, check the link in the description and use promo code Knicks Film School 20 for a 20% discount. When the world's greatest athletes gather in New York City, don't miss it. Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? It's your boy Jonathan Macri with you for another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast and another edition of everybody's favorite off-season summer school activity / who doesn't love talking about the salary cap, which means I have Jeremy Cohen with me. Hello, Jeremy. Again, such a long time and no talk.
I know, John. You just can't get rid of me this week. And again, can you believe what has happened in not only games 1, but also games 2? Game 1 and game 2 of the NBA Finals. Today, it is Monday, June 9th, but it's not because we're not recording that. So yes, I can't believe that thing that happened in game 1 happened. And I know we got over that on Friday. We were able to process it, but I still can't get over what happened with game 2, which was last night. So it's amazing that the outcome of this series is the way that it is, but here we are. So it is.
Yes, it is the off season, which means we occasionally will pre-record stuff a little bit before when it actually runs. I am at the point, again, full disclosure, we're recording this on Thursday night. I am at the point where I am still bringing myself to be able to watch these finals. I know I will watch them. I know I have to watch them. I'll be honest with you. I don't want to. Seeing whatever the hell jersey the Pacers are going to be wearing is just, it's going to be painful. But I won't talk about it anymore because the first 2 games will have happened. And
exactly.
Who the hell knows? There you go.
But I'll tell you, I'll probably double screen it, but the Tony Awards are going to be on in my household for game 2. And there will probably be a screen for basketball. Probably. Maybe it's another TV. I don't know.
I mean, you care about the Tonys. If it were the Oscars, I wouldn't even do a second screen.
Although I'll be with my dad, who very much cares about the Tonys. So I have to care about the Tonys, but I also do care about the Tonys.
No, I mean, listen. If you care about real acting, you should care about the Tonys. Okay. We are getting into Conk, Volume 2 or 2.0. For anybody who may have missed it or not realized that it dropped, the first edition of Conk dropped on Friday, in which we, mostly Jeremy, went through kind of the lay of the land, setting up the parameters for this offseason, what the Knicks are looking at from a financial perspective, and where their priorities lie, and some very basic broad strokes stuff about what we're looking at in terms of their options and why they might want to explore those options. Today, we'll be getting into the nitty gritty of one specific option that should be an option, but we'll get into whether it is definitely going to be an option. And that is, of course, the Taxpayer Mid-level Exception. And with that, I will allow Jeremy to take it away.
Thank you, John. Yes, highly recommend if you have not seen the first episode to watch that, because this will filter right into that. Or this goes into this. Either way, it's important content and it all kind of leads to the rest of everything that we're doing. So today we're talking about the Taxpayer Mid-level Exception, which, as we noted in the last podcast, the Knicks are likely to be below the second apron, but above the first apron this upcoming season, which means that they would have access to the Taxpayer Mid-level Exception, but they would be hard capped at the second apron. So where are we in terms of the money of it? Well, again, where we left off last podcast, we envisioned a world where the Knicks run it back. We don't think this will happen, right, John? We agree?
So again, we're going to go through some different scenarios, some of which would yield the taxpayer mid-level exception, some of which would not.
Right. So imagine all guaranteed players return. You have Huck Porty's team option picked up. PJ Tucker's team options declined, and his contract's also non-guaranteed. The Knicks sign a veteran who's been around the NBA for a while. Could be PJ Tucker. Doesn't really matter for the example here. The Knicks sign Kevin McCullough Jr., and then their roster stands at 13 players. It would leave them with about $7.2 million in second apron space. They would be above the first apron by $4.7 million, but below the second apron by that $7.2 million, which means that they would have room to hit the minimum spend of the 14 players on their roster with the taxpayer mid-level exception.
With the player signed using the taxpayer mid-level exception,
correct,
as the 14th player on the roster, just to be very clear.
Exactly. Thank you. Yes. So what is the taxpayer mid-level exception? Well, you're limited to only 2 years. The non-taxpayer mid-level exception, you can sign a player up to 3 years. The taxpayer mid-level exception, it's limited to 2 years. Using it, as mentioned, would hard cap the Knicks at the second apron. As John, as you very well pointed out in the last podcast, it's not like, hey, let's dip below the second apron, use the exception, and then yippee, we can go above it. It is an actual hard cap. You cannot, once you've triggered this usage of the exception, you can't go above it, the second apron, at any point whatsoever for the entire season. It cannot be used as a de facto traded player exception. What does that mean? Well, with the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, the one the Knicks can't use, that could be used as absorbing a salary from another team. Used to be where it was just a free agent signing. Now you can acquire a player purely into that salary slot. That is not the same for the taxpayer mid-level exception. If a player on another team is earning $5 million next season, the Knicks cannot acquire that player into the exception, specifically the taxpayer mid-level exception. It does not work that way. It is projected in year one to be $5,685,000, and year two, $5,969,250. So it all in all adds up to a little over $11.5 million over a course of 2 seasons. And I'll tell you, the taxpayer mid-level exception and the research I've done, especially with the new CBA, it's been used pretty sparingly. Only the Nuggets have used it, and they've used it in consecutive seasons. Do you know who those players that they used them on were?
I believe, last year it was Dario Saric.
Mm-hmm.
And the year prior was, I'm not going to get it. Someone who's not on their team anymore?
Very true. They had to dump his salary to another team last summer, to a team that the Knicks actually traded with in order to get Karl-Anthony Towns.
Oh my God. This is so bad that I'm forgetting.
This player was very kind to me when I sat courtside to the Nuggets Mavs game. He shares the name of an elite baseball player, former one at that.
I'm drawing a blank. Who is it?
It's Reggie Jackson at this point.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I wasn't coming up with that.
That's okay.
We could have been here all night, and I wasn't.
Wasn't going to let that one happen. But yes, Reggie Jackson and Saric were used. And of course, with Reggie Jackson, they had to dump his salary. And with Saric, the main point, if you recall, was Calvin Booth airing him and Zeke Naji out in a press conference after the deadline for not being able to add anyone to the Nuggets team. And it was like, sir, you gave both of those guys contracts. So I don't know what you're stressing out about here while you're throwing their names or them under the bus. You made the sandwich, sir. So that's where it's at. And Saric now has another, I think it's a player option for this upcoming year, as the second year of the taxpayer mid-level. Calvin Booth is no longer in Denver. So that was that. But this is an example where if you are looking for the taxpayer mid-level exception to be your ticket to a rotation spot? Maybe. But also there's a good chance that this player doesn't contribute as much as one would think. You can still get decent value out of it, but how decent is it truly? So when thinking of what the salaries all look like, there are 4 exceptions for free agents in the NBA, and we're not counting veteran minimums. We're taking that away. So the 4 exceptions are the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, the room exception, the taxpayer mid-level exception, and the biannual exception. Now, why did I list it in that order? Well, that is the order of descending salary for each slot. So the best that you can buy money-wise is with that non-taxpayer mid-level exception. That's $14.1 million. Then there's the room exception. That is available only to teams that use cap space. That is about $8.8 million. That's where it's projected to be. Then it's the taxpayer mid-level exception, which is $5.7 million, followed by the biannual exception, which is $5.1. That can be used every other year. It's only eligible to certain teams. The Knicks could probably not use it. I believe that would hard cap them at the first apron as well. So there's really one salary slot that the Knicks could realistically use here, which is that taxpayer mid-level exception. But the point is, you can earn more if you're a free agent going to a different team that has the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which the Knicks don't, that has the room exception, which the Knicks don't, or makes about the same money with the biannual exception, which the Knicks don't have access to. Yeah. All of this to say that the better crop of free agents, if they're not signing with their own teams or signing with a team with cap space, can get more money from other teams. So you're not going to have your pick of the litter with the taxpayer mid-level exception.
Yeah, $5.6 million doesn't buy what it used to, unfortunately.
It doesn't. It really doesn't. And another point to consider, if you're a veteran who is earning, let's say you've played 10 years, your cap hit is going to be like $2.2 million. But the cash that you make is going to be north of $3 million. Now, is 5.7 more than, I think it's like 3.3, 3.4, something like that? Yes, it certainly is. But the difference in production, it's not significant. So you're getting a player who's better than the minimum, but not so significantly so that they're probably giving you incredible basketball. They could give you good minutes, but history may not also be completely on that side.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well said.
So looking through that team that we constructed, adding a player using the taxpayer mid-level exception, the Knicks would have about $1.5 million in second apron space and 14 players on the roster. As we mentioned, that minimum deal with that NBA veteran, it's a little fungible. They could make it non-guaranteed. They could non-guarantee that player in January and then do some roster shenanigans that are a little complex right now. But all of that's doable. So they could run it back and do that. Great. We know financially that works. Let's talk about candidates for who fits into this time. Yes. Oh, the fun part. I thought you were saying something else. I thought you were saying the funny part is like that. It was like,
no, sorry, no. There's nothing funny about the taxpayer mid-level exception. But
this is not a laughing matter. This is very serious. This is very serious. Completely. We gotta lock in for this one. So candidates. Well, we can rule out restricted free agents. Why can we likely rule out restricted free agents? The best ones will cost too much. They will cost more than the taxpayer mid-level exception amount is there. You also can't acquire a player via a sign and trade because for two reasons. Number one, the taxpayer mid-level exception doesn't work like that, as we talked about. And also, the Knicks are not able to successfully do a sign and trade because that would hard cap them at the first apron and it would cause all sorts of other issues. So if you're thinking like, oh, Jonathan Kuminga, what about him? Yeah. Could we use him for the taxpayer mid-level exception? The answer is no. The Knicks could not do that. You can only offer 2 years.
Yeah, and if there's a player who a team is like at the point where they would be willing to let go for the amount of money for the not for the taxpayer mid-level exception, that team like that player's not going to be very good.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. The other ones likely aren't good enough to earn that amount. So good on you for thinking ahead. But yes, and also restricted free agents can have their teams match any salary there too. So we can pretty much rule out restricted free agents unless their respective team says, you know what, we don't want to make you a restricted free agent anymore. You can be an unrestricted free agent, in which case they would no longer be a restricted free agent, which kind of still further proves the point that we could probably rule out restricted free agents. But there are a couple players who are headed for restricted free agency who could be unrestricted free agents based on how the money has to shake out. The goal here is to try to stay young. Looking for players who are in their mid 30s, early 30s, probably not the most ideal, understanding that it is in line with, to a degree, of where the Knicks and their peak for their players would be. You want to stay on the younger side. You want to find guys who are more in their prime than not. And that's hard to do because if you're in your prime, you're going to be expensive. If you're in your prime and good, I should say. So, you can add other salary, but then you don't want to be in a position like we just talked about with the Nuggets, where if I said, yeah, just get Dario Saric's money and then boom, there you go. You got salary to move. You don't want bad money. Bad money is better than no money, but is it better than no money? Because now you have bad money on the books. You need to grease the wheels. Yeah. But then if you don't have the picks or the sweeteners to do it, you're just spending more, but you're trading less. It's not the prettiest way to go.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yes. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, just looking last year again, like Nick Batum wasn't actually signed using the taxpayer mid-level exception, but he signed for, I think it was like $4.8 million. Nick Batum's a very good player. And he's a player that certainly helped the Clippers and that version of him would have helped the Knicks. So I do want to at least say I could envision a scenario where if the right older player came along, the Knicks might be interested. But yes. I agree with you. Ideally, you want to stay young.
And that is the way to sweeten the deal, where it's like we talked about, hey, do you want to earn a little bit more than the minimum because you're worth it? We can give you that, at least a portion or the full taxpayer mid-level exception. Clippers, also interestingly enough, did you know that they were the only team in the NBA last year to use the biannual exception and the non-taxpayer mid-level exception? I'm doing my research. That was I hadn't realized.
Biannual, was that on Chris Dunn, or am I making
it? Wasn't, because they signed and traded for Chris Dunn into, but they used, nevertheless. I would have to double check it, but I'm pretty sure
I will take your word for it.
Sure. And again, looking for the best player available. That would be ideal. How much is fit going to come into consideration? Well, if the right fit isn't there, you could consider upgrading by adding a player and then flipping them later. For example, the Knicks last year, we don't know exactly when the timing of Tyus Jones was, but there could have been, based on the reporting that came out, the offer to give Tyus Jones the taxpayer mid-level while they'd already signed Cameron Payne and had drafted Tyler Kolek and, of course, had Jalen Brunson. But again, the timing of that report is what's in question. We don't know if the Knicks said, hey, we've got these 3 point guards. Why don't you come on in and we'll figure it out. So that's our. And if you're targeting a big man, he should space the floor. That's an important distinction. You should probably not find a big who can't shoot. It's just, you can likely get that value either in-house, especially because the Knicks, right now at the moment would have Mitch and Huck Porty.
Yeah.
But also you can usually get those guys on minimum salaries instead. So you don't really have to go out and use your taxpayer mid-level on a non-shooter. I think that would be a poor investment for the Knicks or for really almost any team.
Yeah, and again, just to give folks like an idea of what kind of big man that you're getting with this amount of money. Last year, again, not used or not signed using the taxpayer mid-level, but Andre Drummond signed for 2 years and $10 million. So about $5 million, or not about $5 million a year. Like Andre Drummond thought by some to be a top end backup, maybe a top 10 backup in the league, something around there. He obviously started a bunch of games for them. But Andre Drummond.
Big stats guy, the impact on winning, maybe a little questionable for sure. But exactly. And I don't know if that was the best bet for them. I don't know if they would have done something differently if they could have.
I don't know if many of their bets paid off.
Last season, certainly not.
No.
So these are the players who are too qualified, in my opinion, to be taxpayer mid-level exception targets. And you tell me if I am wrong on any of them. It's Bruce Brown, Karis LeVert, Dennis Schroeder, Luke Kennard, Malik Beasley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Luke Cornett, and Ty Jerome. I feel like every single player on this list is going to make more money than the taxpayer mid-level exception. Your hesitancy makes me wonder if there's someone that you think could make that amount, though.
Well, the first place my eye went to was Luke Cornett, and then I was quickly like, well, why? Why am I hesitant? Because in my mind, he's still Luke Cornett, who Phil Jackson plucked from the scrap heap of undrafted free agents. And no, that's not the Luke Cornett that we're talking about here. The Luke Cornett we're talking about here is a guy who is capable of changing a fucking playoff game in the Eastern Conference semifinals. And I sure as hell hope somebody gives him more than $5 million a year. If I was the Celtics, I would certainly want to bring him or keep him around. And the Celtics have done a pretty good job of keeping those level of players around for decent money in recent years. The only other two names, or the two names that I will say, everybody else, I mean, Schroeder is older, but he's still really good, So I don't think the two names that I'm looking at are Kennard and Brown. Now Kennard is one of those funky players that the theory of Luke Kennard has been better than Luke Kennard for years now, but then you watch him and you're like, why isn't this guy just better? And because he does all the things, he makes every three he takes. So I don't know how to read Luke Kennard. And then Bruce Brown, it's been 2 years since he was a big time impact player on the Nuggets. The first season in Indy did not go swimmingly, and then last season was it was a lost year. So I don't part. Yeah, I just could some team give him I don't know a significant portion of their non-taxpayer, maybe, or I guess that's the one I'm not convinced on, though.
Okay, well, with Kennard, he's one of the best shooters in the NBA.
He is. That's the thing. He makes every three he takes, right. And yet, is there desire for him? Because it seems like everywhere he goes, he doesn't play. But I don't know.
Well, he saw solid minutes in Memphis, and I would imagine
some minutes in Memphis. Yeah,
Memphis is in a weird spot because they also cleared a lot of money. They could be a cap space team, and then they could renegotiate with Jaren Jackson Jr., but also maybe they don't. Either way, okay. So Luke Kennard, I still think he can make more than that.
Yeah, and I don't think the Knicks are going after Luke Kennard. Bruce Brown is a guy who the Knicks have been linked to in the past. That's why
Yes.
Yeah.
Bruce Brown could be signed and traded by the Pelicans to another team that's comfortable being under the first apron. That could you'd have to give him at least 3 years in order for the sign and trade to work. It doesn't have to be 3 guaranteed years, but I see him as a potential Pelican signing and trading him away candidate, which is why I think he would be making more than a little under $6 million. And I hear you on the injury riddled portion of it, but the Nuggets missed him.
Games last year. I mean,
it's so hard to judge though, because he was on a bad Raptors team and he was on a bad Pelicans team.
I know they were both bad.
I just think he'll make more than $6 million because when healthy, which I understand is a factor, but when healthy, I think he can earn more than that. And in terms of, this is the other thing. Are we talking about players in a vacuum, or are we talking about fit? And we're going to talk about fit with respect to the players in a vacuum, which is a fancy way of saying we can keep players in mind, but if we are just sticking for right now to, hey, this is the team that's in front of us, even if this probably isn't the team that's going to be there, and maybe they change things up, the team on paper, how do these players fit in with all of that? Bruce Brown, bringing less shooting in, probably not the right approach. Kennard, you could do it, but also the Knicks found great value in someone like Shamet off the bench for the minimum. So you don't need to necessarily go that route of, hey, let's get Kennard for the taxpayer mid-level if we can find someone to give similar but slightly worse without hard capping ourselves there.
Last thing I'm going to say about Bruce Brown very briefly. I like on the current, because you were talking about fit on the current version of the roster. I agree that Bruce Brown doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If again, I don't anticipate this, to be very clear. If Josh Hart were not on this team next year, Bruce Brown would make to me more sense. I will just leave it at that.
I agree that if you are looking for someone to give you Josh Hart effort for a low price point because you've moved Josh Hart for someone else, yes. I just don't know if he's taxpayer mid-level exception worthy. Might make more, but I completely hear you out. So let's start with one player, and we're going to go honestly from small to big. Tyus Jones. We just talked about him very briefly. 6'1" point guard, 29 years old. He's been very efficient, shoots well, especially from the corners, and he finds players in the corners. He has consistently been a good guy in terms of finding players spotting up in the corners, which we know the Knicks have historically liked. So it makes sense for why the Knicks had interest in him to begin with. He ranked 32nd in corner three assists per 100 possessions in 24-25. The year before that, he ranked 16th. The year before that, he ranked 14th. So this is clearly someone who would work within the flow of the Knicks offense. And you might be wondering, well, what does the Knicks offense look like? Because Tom Thibodeau is no longer the head coach of the Knicks. I don't know about you, John, but I believe that the philosophy that the organization has and what Tibbs had was very much harmonious in the sense of the Knicks found a candidate in Tibbs who believed they had the same core beliefs, the same values.
Well,
and it would not, what I mean by that in terms of like generally of finding the open man. I know this is all jargon. Like like what is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's
boilerplate. But driving to the rim, which Knicks didn't do the best job of necessarily last year. Finding guys in the corners, which the Knicks didn't do a better job of doing. Protecting the rim. I would imagine that the traits that were inhabited, the shared common values that were good, are going to be overlapping with this next head coach.
I mean, every team in the league is looking for corner threes, and the Knicks have hunted corner threes, and I think the numbers say they've done a pretty good job of generating corner threes. Above the break threes, they were shit this year, at least. They were good at finding corner threes. To me, Tyus Jones falls under the heading of good basketball player. Get good basketball players on your team. I would not put any weight or value in any of the negative lineup data with him last year in Phoenix, because that situation was a disaster. The only thing, and it's funny, I thought you were going in a different direction with the Tibbs thing. Like, again, I don't expect a whole bunch of head coaches are going to come in here and like be dying to play Tyus Jones alongside Jalen Brunson. But I know that any coach they hire is going to be more open to that than the last head coach would have been. So
it would be tremendously small, and the defense would probably be a bit tough. And we talked about the taxpayer mid-level and the offer to Jones last year. Went to Phoenix, as you mentioned. But what I'm curious about is, okay, you bring Tyus Jones to New York. Where do the minutes come from? This is a player who averaged 25.3 minutes per game over the last 4 seasons. Yeah. Cameron Payne played in an average of 15.1 minutes per game last year. So you're saying to Tyus Jones, hey, you're probably going to see a minutes reduction. And again, this is all that was under Tibbs. It could be a whole different story, but Brunson's not going anywhere. And you need complementary players to Brunson. So the role just feels very odd. And the last thing I'll say before I turn it back over to you is, at what point does Tyler Kolek get to play?
So that's the big thing. If the Knicks went out and signed Tyus Jones, I don't want to say that it would be and signed him to a 2-year deal. I don't want to say that it would be an indictment on the Kolek draft pick, but like, if Like, I actually don't know what else I would say. Like, how else could you read that?
I'll tell you how. It would have to be Tyler Kolek went out in a trade and we need someone to play backup minutes. That's the only way, which isn't to say, hey, the Knicks need to keep Tyler Kolek because, they shouldn't make an upgrade. If they use him to make an upgrade, we'll talk about it. But if he's on this team, bringing in Tyus Jones to then have him sit on the bench when you've traded that draft equity to then it's now a second year where he doesn't have a role. And that was a huge problem with Tibbs. It's being reported that these players just felt like they didn't have roles. And last year, Tyler Kolek, he did have a role. His role was, you don't have a role. You get nothing. You are stapled to the bench, and that's that. And that was it.
The players who were like, I don't know what my role is. Again, I think that's code for I don't like my role, which again, I don't think you're disputing. I don't think anybody gives a shit what Tyler Kolek had to say about his experience on the Knicks last year, other than a subset of Knicks fans. I think
you're sure, but I think you're underestimating that subset is all I'm saying.
Okay, that's fine. I still don't care about that subset.
I know you don't.
As you well know.
As we don't have to relitigate that. Yeah, no, we're good.
No, the only thing I do want to say in regards to looking at the campaign minutes as a comparison, again, number one, I think another coach would at least be more open to the idea of playing them more. And number two, perhaps more importantly, or certainly more importantly, Tyus Jones is a better player than Cameron Payne. So to the extent that like there was really, even if we may have sat around and be like, maybe we should do more campaign Jalen Brunson minutes. Like campaign was not knocking down the door, being like, for more minutes based on his play. He was a really good player this season, but like Tyus Jones is a different caliber.
Exactly. So that's Tyus Jones. Next, we can go to Sam Merrill. Sam Merrill, 29 years old, 6'4" guard. He's an efficient wing. He takes and makes threes, and he makes a lot of them. That's his game. He is a shooter. But interestingly enough, over 87% of his total minutes in his NBA career have come over the last 2 seasons. And this is someone who entered the league in the 2020-21 season. He was drafted in the late second round of 2020. So he's only now doing things where before he was really just not a guy who could see minutes. And it's easy to understand why, because 5 years ago, he was 24 years old. That is very old to be a prospect. He's got a strong EPM, which is important. 2023-24. He was in the 88th percentile on offense. He was in the 88th percentile, defense 69th percentile. Although I think that one of those numbers might have been a typo, so apologies. And then in 2024-25 season, 76th percentile, 62nd percentile on offense, and then 87th percentile on defense. So whether it's a typo there or not, he has been good. He's been good in those moments. The question is, will the Cavs retain him? And the Cavs are in a really fascinating spot because they are, I would gather, if I were Cleveland, I would say stuff happens. It was really unfortunate that we went out the way that we did, considering how good our regular season was. But we believe that this core and this team is worth building around. And if they do that, there is a world where they go above the second apron to keep everyone there. You only have so many more years with Donovan Mitchell before he might say, honestly, we tried. I don't know if I want to be here. You could say that about a lot of stars.
Yeah.
Where the Cavs are in a fascinating spot is, do you know who won the Defensive Player of the Year award, John?
The guy who got a lot richer because he won that award.
That would be Evan Mobley. So Evan Mobley went from a 25% max to a 30% max because of said award. I believe that went from about 38 million to 46 million. So the Cavs, they've got some money on their books, some real dough. They also have Ty Jerome, who they probably want to keep. Well, and they also, yes.
I was going to say, it's been a little while since they got eliminated, but like Ty Jerome did not make himself bags of cash in that in these playoffs and that series in particular.
But I would argue it's not that he didn't earn him money; it's that it probably cost him some money. But this was He had a phenomenal season. I could see there's another team that is comfortable paying him the equivalent or maybe even greater than the mid-level exception, the non-taxpayer mid-level exception.
Yeah, no.
In Brooklyn, and you want to just use your cap space and then try to flip Ty Jerome, you could do that. And if you're Ty Jerome, you say, yeah, I get paid. That's pretty sweet. I'll do that. So there's a world where the Cavs keep Ty Jerome and then they can't afford Sam Merrill if he gets more than a minimum contract, or they don't want to afford it. There's a world where they lose Ty Jerome and they say, well, we want to retain some of our players, so they give Sam Merrill a little bit of a pay bump. Different ways they can go about it, which is the question of, will the Cavs retain Sam Merrill? A lot of it probably depends on what happens with Ty Jerome.
Like, I don't know. If I want elite skill, if I'm building a team. Like, if you could give me one elite skill, just one elite skill, that could be worth so much. And Sam Merrill, is he one of the best 3-point shooters in the league? I mean, even you say, all
very good.
He's, he was 40% 2 years ago. He was 37% last year. But you watch this guy, that's 39% over the last 2 years. You watch the shots that he takes. I mean, you want just no daylight, flying around screens and no daylight. These are hard threes that he's not no team is just leaving him open. Well, other than maybe the Knicks occasionally, no team is just leaving him open by the arc to just fire away. And if I could get that skill on my team, especially given the talk of what kind of offense now the Knicks want to maybe attempt to become, you want to talk about a shift away from Josh Hart. I mean, you're not gonna get a bigger shift than this guy.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be moving away from Josh Hart. It could be adding to it. But then, okay, is Deuce McBride starting? Is Deuce McBride on the team? How are you fitting minutes into Sam Merrill? Because if you're giving him the taxpayer mid-level, you are probably banking on him earning at least 20 minutes per game. So you just got to find a way to make all of the minutes work. That's where the push and pull of talent and fit are respectively.
Yeah.
So, Gary Trent Jr.
I was waiting for him.
26 years old, 6'6" wing is how he's listed.
He's been around for 13 years. It feels
he has, and yet he's only 26. I know it feels like he is. Yeah, they're just.
He was drafted with Taj Gibson.
Yep. Some of those players, you're like, he's only that age. I could have sworn he just cracked 30, and no, he hasn't. Gary Trent Jr. is 26 years old. Fairly efficient player. He's a high frequency 3-point shooter. Naturally, when people think of him, they think of his shooting abilities. Historically, more of his shots have come from above the break. He has not been a good corner 3 shooter. And again, if this is something the Knicks prioritize, then that it's not a disqualifying reason, but it is an important factor to consider. Over the course of his career, he's been pretty poor. He's had solid EPM over the years. His offensive EPM over the last 6 seasons has been above the 70th percentile every single time. His defensive EPM has been pretty lackluster. The average of those 6 seasons has been 44th percentile. So you're not going to find a player who's giving you a whole lot defensively. So you're finding someone who's pretty good offensively if we're using EPM, and defensively is not going to help you a ton. This is also someone, though, who's been a playoff riser historically. I believe the numbers grade out that his regular season to postseason jump is pretty strong. So when you're thinking of the guys who can bring it, of course, he had a bit of a catastrophic error in Game 5 that helped lead to the elimination of the Bucks, which then led to the Pacers advancing. Right. It is what it is. But he's done better in the playoffs than he has in the regular season. And I know that there are a lot of Knicks fans who look at Gary Trent Jr. as a viable option, not saying he isn't one. But he's also a poor finisher at the rim. And we know that the Knicks were the worst team in the playoffs, not including the play-in teams, at finishing at the rim, which I'm just saying it's not a mandatory thing, but it's like, all right, so 2 things that the Knicks could do better in: corner 3 shooting and finishing. Gary Trent Jr. doesn't really do either of those very well. Yes.
No, I just was like, this dude put up 9 threes a game in the first round against the Pacers and hit half of them.
Yeah.
Like, he is one of those, like, we'll get to the rest of your list. I would be surprised. I respect what you're saying about finishing at the rim and like corner 3-point shooting and the whole thing. I'd be surprised if we're going to come upon another player that I would want more for the taxpayer mid-level than Gary Trent Jr. Only for this main reason. This dude at one point got traded straight up, I think. Maybe there was a pick going one way or the other for Norm Powell. Norm Powell, who is a like 15 to 20 point per game scorer and like was very much in the running for 6th Man of the Year award this year, in the running for most improved. He was in the running to make a freaking all-star team. And Gary Trent Jr. got traded when he was like 22 or 23 years old, I think, for Norm Powell. Maybe he was 23.
And he's 24, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe 23. Well, he was young. The point is he was young.
Sure.
He's still young, but he was like really young. And that was like, and it was wild because it was like, I remember at the time, I was like, well, Norm Powell, like really nice scorer. He is what he is. Gary Trent Jr., man, this guy might, like, he's already a player. And what might he become? And then there was that rumor, or not a rumor, there was like a report that he had agreed to, like, wasn't it like a 3-year, $75 million contract or something crazy?
Yeah. I don't know the validity of the report is the only thing. But yes.
But like, I remember seeing it and I was like, oh, wow, that's a lot. But he's young and he's like, he could shoot, he could defend, he could put the ball on the floor a little bit.
He can't really, he struggles on the defensive end. Like, listen, if he were a perfect candidate for this, or if I should say, if he were the ideal player, he'd be earning more than the taxpayer mid-level exception. So all of these roses have their thorns. Fully agree.
He's not a zero on deep. Like, you could put him out there and you could feel like, should he have been the guy defending next to Damian Lillard? No. Now, well, is he going to look a lot better defending next to Jalen Brunson? Maybe not. But again, what are the Knicks going to be asking him to do? How many minutes are they going to be asking him to play? I just like, if I'm going to, like, clearly this guy's career has gone sideways. There's zero question. The fact that he played for a minimum last year and is now on a list of mid-level possibilities, like 100% his career has gone sideways. Maybe that's just the way his career is going to go, and he's never going to go back to the player that was in the conversation for like, oh, is he going to get paid $20 million a year? I don't know, but like, this is one of those ones where I would love to know the intel on him, like behind the scenes. Like, what is his, is there a reason his career has gone sideways? He fascinates me from that perspective. Yeah.
And the fact that he had a minimum salary last year. I mean, someone like Malik Beasley at least got paid, I think it was $6 million. Gary Trent Jr. was earning the minimum. And now, granted, he went to a team that had Giannis Antetokounmpo, which was very helpful. But yeah, he went from earning a whole lot of money to the lowest he could legally make in the NBA.
And the dude hit 41.6% of his threes. It's just like, he's not a bad player. He's not. No,
and to be clear, the argument is not that he's a bad player. It is far from that. I just want to go over his shot diet, which is, this is the frequency if you are watching this. And if you're not, he doesn't take shots at the rim, which is fine because he also doesn't make shots at the rim. He takes long mid-range shots at a decent clip. Most of his shots have been non-corner threes above the break. And if you look historically, he just really has not been a corner three, take shots, make shots guy. Now, could he adjust his style? Yes. I just don't imagine he suddenly takes because you could see it there, like his shot distribution, he did take more, but from a frequency standpoint, it didn't really change. Now, here's the thing. When you look at the percentages, he hits those above the break threes, exactly what we're talking about, which is why he is a candidate in the first place. He hits the above the break threes. What he does not hit and has not hit at a strong level is the corner three. And again, it's not like, well, he's automatically ruled out. I don't want to make that seem like what I'm saying. It's not. And you'll notice if you are watching that there was, a couple years early in his career where he was shooting very nicely and then from the corner and then shot less nicely and then was just quite atrocious. And then last year was in the 88th percentile among players of his archetype. He shot 48% from three. For context, in the corner, he shot 48% from three. The year before that was 36%. This is filtering out garbage time. The year before that, 31%, 36%, 32%. One of these years, I think it was also a combination of the midseason trade. Point is, he shot 48% from the corner last year. That's a great sign. What, though, was the reason for why he likely shot 48% from the corner, John?
I have no idea.
The Giannis Antetokounmpo bump. Because Giannis Antetokounmpo is one of the best at finding shooters in the corners. So the Knicks, as things stand, don't have someone on their roster. Jalen Brunson has done well with corner three assists in the past. But okay, so you can still find above the break three guys. That's great. But the Knicks just don't have a ton of playmaking in their front court. It's not something with Bridges, Anunoby, and Towns that they have.
Well,
they lack it. Is there more passing that can be developed? Are there different play styles? Of course, absolutely. But if we were to look at each of those players and say, like, well, how are they really strong playmakers? None of them really falls into that category. Some are fine. Some, like OG Anunoby, that's not his game.
I'll say two things. One, you could argue that the Knicks have the best corner three generator in the league in Mitchell Robinson getting offensive rebounds and kicking it out. I understand.
Indirectly, but sure. It's creating new possessions. Absolutely.
I don't. My larger point is I don't care. The Knicks traded 5 first-round picks for a guy who this year forgot how to shoot above the break threes. Shot 31% to be exact on above the break threes this year. On the low volume, he has always shot those shots out. So I wonder if one of the adjustments that they will make going into next year is just tell Mikal Bridges, hey, you know what? Why don't you stay right over there in the corners? I think one of the reasons they needed Mikal to keep taking those above the break threes, not that he took a ton of them, was because they didn't have like a whole lot of other better options to do it. And that was kind of his role in the offense. Because if you have Josh Hart on the court, well, Josh Hart's going to go space to the corner. Again, just like playing out different scenarios, is there a world where Gary Trent Jr. starts next to Mikal Bridges and he's in the above the break, and then Mikal goes to the corner? I don't know. I just like this would not. I understand everything you're saying. I don't disagree with a word of it. I'm not sure the corner three thing would be dispositive for me personally.
Well, a couple things. First, with Bridges, especially if it's a contract year, I don't envision the front office or the coach saying, well, I mean, sure, they could extend him. We also talked about the difficulties with where that is. But then even with that said, are you paying $35 million a year for a guy where you're saying just stand in the corner and that's too much money in my opinion to give a guy. I understand that he can do other things, but if you're saying, hey, your role is just to sit pretty in the corner, like OG at least gives you one place away from all second team defense. That's not what Bridges is going to give you.
But OG also was hitting above the break threes.
He was also hitting corner threes until he wasn't in the playoffs. But my point is, you have to, if you're giving someone $35 million, they have to contribute way more on offense than sit in the corner and then take some pull up mid range shots. They've got to be able to hit above the break threes. They've got to be able to finish. They've got to be able to create. Okay. Also, and the other second point I just want to make is if you're expecting a player who's earning the taxpayer mid-level or even less than that to be a starter for a contender, then I think your expectations are too high.
That's very true.
So if Gary Trent Jr. is starting, I think there is a larger problem.
Again, I'm just trying to envision all possible scenarios. But I completely agree with you. Again, he could be had for this amount of money potentially for a reason. Look, if the Knicks want to get more bang for their buck on Mikal Bridges on his next extension, then they should take the $5.6 million and go hire a shooting coach. And that would be the best expenditure they could make of their mid-level exception. But
totally agree.
But I digress.
Okay. Let's look at 3 players, how they've historically graded out, right? So this is Darko, the daily plus minus. There are 3 distinct players. Do you know who any of these players are? The 3 lines: a blue line, a green line, and a red line.
For anybody listening on the audio feed, I'm literally looking at a red line, a green line, and a blue line. I have no idea who these players are.
Okay. So I will reveal it. The blue line is Gary Trent Jr.
Okay.
The green line is Landry Shamet, and the red line is Sam Merrill.
Okay.
And if you look at their overall DPM, daily plus minus, there's no doubting that Trent and Merrill have had better careers.
Uh-huh.
The thing is, Landry Shamet, minimum player, not that far away from them. And if we look at the offense, yes, Gary Trent Jr., good offense. There's a reason for why we're talking about him as a potential candidate. Sam Merrill has rebounded a little bit. Landry Shamet, it's clear why he's on a minimum contract. But on the defensive side, Trent Jr. really has not worked out well there. Shamet's defense has been better, and Merrill's is around there. So when you go back to like kind of the overall arching point, I don't think the difference in production overall between Trent Jr. and Merrill is that significantly different from Shamet, who is earning a minimum contract. All is to say, yes.
No, finish your point.
No, just the point being, it's not the Knicks would be blasphemous for the Knicks to give Merrill or Trent Jr. the mid-level exception. That's not what I'm saying at all. I can absolutely understand the value that comes from giving these guys pay raises. All I'm saying is that if we are talking about these players as effectively a 9th man, maybe a 10th man, you can get similar value out of a minimum player. You would probably get better value out of the taxpayer mid-level exception. I also don't know if the difference when you're probably pressed up against the second apron is worth what it is. I'm not against signing either of these players. I'm merely stating that for the role that this type of player would be in, the gap between the minimum and the mid-level exception is not that significant. It's pretty close.
I hear you. I respect advanced stats. I think they are a valuable tool, and I appreciate this. And I'm actually not surprised that the advanced stats on Landry Shamet are what they are. I also watched Landry Shamet for this entire year. And to be very clear, Landry Shamet in the conference finals on a per minute basis, considering his play at both ends, might have been the second best Knick in the fucking series. Like after Mitchell Robinson, he really was that good. Like he was awesome in his minutes. I'm pretty sure he finished with the best plus minus, either him or Deuce. But it was really good. It was really, really good. I also watched him in a lot of other games where he looked unplayable. Now, if you listen to this, you might be like, well, yeah, because Tibbs never really gave him a real shot, and he would go out, send him out there for 3-4 minutes, and then pull him back in, and that's absolutely fair. To me, this is one of those instances where the extra that you're getting, the little bit extra that you're getting, might be worth the extra money, because it is that little bit extra. To me, is the difference between like, oh, this guy's definitely a rotation player on a decent team, versus a guy like Shamet, who you watch him on the wrong night and you're like, this guy probably should not be playing basketball like that. And again, I respect the advanced stats. I respect what you're saying. If the Knicks brought back Landry Shamet, by the way, I wouldn't mind. If they want to have him as a depth piece, absolutely. But I don't know. I think it's tough.
two pushbacks.
Sure.
Number one, he was injured for the first 3 months of the season and then had to work his way back and then got healthy. Because we know, based on how Tibbs and how his preseason rotations work out, it seemed that he was being featured or that he was going to be featured consistently. So that certainly derailed him, which then impacted the rest of the season. But number two, there was a podcast leading up to the end of the season where you and I both talked about, in sincerity, Landry Shamet potentially being an X factor. And he was playing that well. So I get what you're saying, but I think we're not properly contextualizing what Shamet was doing and also what he could have been doing because he was injured. Because once he got into a groove, things are better. Of course, you look at him on the wrong night. Absolutely. You look at a lot of players on the wrong night, they're going to look bad. I just feel as though as he was hitting his stride and in certain key moments, it showed itself that the difference between that taxpayer mid-level and what Shamet was earning on the minimum salary, it wasn't that significant. It wasn't that different. If Knicks want to use taxpayer mid-level exception on Trent or Merrill, I get it. Not even saying no, but I just want people to, I kind of want to caution them on what the taxpayer mid-level exception gets you in terms of talent and what a minimum salary can get you, because you can get good value from that too.
I think let's split the baby and say I think it's fair to say that if there are other, there might be a better way to go with this money. But like if it was one of like these sorts of guys that you would spend this money on, I do not think it would be the worst thing in the world.
I totally agree. It would definitely not be the worst thing in the world. There are far worse things. But there are limitations. With that in mind, let's go on to our next candidate, Jake LaRavia, 24 years old, 6'7" forward. He's been very efficient. Most of his shots are above the break or at the rim. So if that's what you're looking for, that's something you can get. Takes very few corner threes. Again, doesn't have to be a factor. It's okay to not take corner threes. I don't want to make it seem like Gary Trent Jr. not taking corner threes is an abomination. It's not. It's just scheming and where players are comfortable. LaRavia has rebounded well on offense throughout his career. He ranked 28th out of 323 qualified players in deflections per 36 minutes. Problem, of course, with that stat is LaRavia is not playing 36 minutes. So it's how do you extrapolate that data where it might feel a little bit skewed? But the question that I have is, can he be trusted to add value to a contending team? Because this is someone who went from the Grizzlies and couldn't really crack the rotation to the Kings. And part of it, I'm sure, was financial. But if you're the Knicks, sure, you could take a flyer on him. Are you in the position where you're using your taxpayer mid-level exception to take a flyer on Jake LaRavia? That's where I'm a bit more skeptical.
So this is the weird one where Memphis didn't. What was it? They didn't tenure his fourth year option, was it?
They, after his second year,
that's it,
decided to say, we're not going to give you a contract for your fourth year.
Yeah. Which is like, he was the 19th pick in the draft and he had been pretty good. And then he came into Memphis this year and in his third year, starting out the year in Memphis, he was like, I don't want to sit here and say like I've watched a whole bunch of Memphis games, but like he was having the best year of his career. And then they traded him to the Kings, I think, because of the contract situation, because they didn't pick up his fourth year option. Like, well, this guy's not going to be here next year anyway. Maybe we fucked up, but either way, let's try to recoup something for him while we can. And I think they got, they didn't get much. This was in some kind of he was in the Marcus Smart trade, basically.
Yes, it was a 3-team deal. The Wizards.
It was a 3-team deal. There were no picks traded in that deal, so it was basically just here, go try to latch on somewhere else. And then he played with the Kings, and the Kings are a dysfunctional mess. Going back to your initial points, you try to get someone who's young. LaRavia is 24. Is he a player? Maybe. I don't know. But I think like you could do worse than finding a 6'7" guy who could shoot threes.
You could. He just doesn't really make them is the problem.
Hold on.
Look,
37% for his career.
I understand.
He doesn't take a lot.
Look at the breakdown. Right. So if you hit threes, but you're not taking them, then is that giving you significant value? And I think the other argument you could make is, why are you spending resources and devoting time to Laravia when you just drafted Bacom Dadier? Like, why wouldn't you just slot Dadier into that role instead of spending money on a guy you're kind of iffy on and may not be able to contribute?
That's a fair question.
To me doesn't make sense. So I would stay away from Laravia, but I'm sure he will come up among fans. So that's where we stand. Another player, Amir Coffey, he is very much more under the radar, and there's a reason for why he's under the radar. Well, he's a 6'8" forward. He takes and makes corner threes, cool, and mid-range shots as well. He's been efficient the last couple seasons, but if we're looking advanced stat-wise, he's been pretty disappointing. His EPM has been bad. His highest offensive EPM over the last 3 years is the 36th percentile, so not great. And his highest defensive EPM over the last 3 years was the 27th percentile. So he, as a archetype with 6'8" wing, 28 years old, can do something. It's tough to gain value, especially because he's a poor rebounder and gets low stock percentages with steals and blocks. And he did not appear in the playoffs. The Clippers were in the playoffs. Amir Coffey did not participate. So one of those guys where meets the criteria, but I feel can probably pretty easily be turned away as a candidate. What do you think?
I just find it fascinating. He's been with the Clippers for 6 years. It is very, very, very rare you see an undrafted player who has never cracked double-digit scoring and is just kind of like a 9th, 10th man, which is what Coffey has been throughout his career, stay with the same team for 6 years. That's incredibly rare. I have no opinion on Amir Coffey other than that.
That's fair. But yeah, I mean, that may show there's high character there. They had opportunities to not have him. So
maybe
worse people to have in your locker room if that's exactly who he is. So let's look at the current roster for the 2025-26 season. All right. It's if we wanted to revert back to the old Tibbs lineup, it would be under contract Brunson, Hart, Bridges, Anunoby, Towns. And then off the bench, it'd be Kolek, McBride, Dadier, PJ Tucker. They have the team option and he's non-guaranteed. Mitchell Robinson, fully guaranteed contract, and Ariel Hukporti, who has a team option. That would be, if you brought everyone back, that's 11 players right there. Now, I want to hone in on the small forward, power forward spot for the backup. Because also, if you switch things a little bit, because PJ Tucker slotting in as a backup power forward, I think is a generous label for him. This is someone who is brought in for his leadership, not his playing abilities at the age of 40. So imagine a world here where then you go to the new starting lineup that Tibbs had, which was Brunson, Bridges, Anunoby, Towns, and Robinson. Then off the bench, you had Kolek, McBride, Hart, Hukporti, and then maybe you have Dadier on the outside looking in, although it would make sense to have Dadier as a power forward. Point being, there's an open spot there. That's the real question. And again, maybe Dadier sees minutes at the power forward spot, which he should see minutes this year if he's on this team. Otherwise, it would feel like kind of a waste of a pick. You want him to be there, but maybe it's the sort of thing where if the next coach is running a 9-man rotation, Dadier is the 10th man. And the moment that someone gets hurt, Dadier is elevated. That could be an option. But it's worth asking with that front court spot and without considering any other pieces being moved, is there a player who is a big who could slot in there? Well, maybe there is. Maybe Ariel Hukporti isn't going to be the backup center. Maybe you start Cat at the 4 and Mitch at the 5. And now you need someone to soak up minutes at the 5 who's not a rim protector, who can do more than that. Which brings us to Guerschon Yabusele. Yabusele is 30 years old. He's a 6'8" big. He was very efficient off the bench in Philadelphia. He's got a very small sample size at the NBA level, primarily because he played in Europe for 5 years, then had an Olympics of a lifetime, unless your name is Karl-Anthony, or some other American players that have been pretty significant, and other players in general. But Yabusele had a great Olympics in 2024, came back over to the US, signed a minimum contract with the Sixers. Now, here's the thing about Yabusele. Of all of the players that we had talked about on minimum salaries that the Knicks could have used Jericho Sims for, the one I was most comfortable with was Yabusele. But I wasn't comfortable with the idea of giving up assets for Yabusele, even if they were second round picks. It just didn't feel like the right moment in time for me. Then, of course, the Knicks got Delon Wright. They didn't give up any draft equity for that. In fact, they got the rights to an international player. Whether that player comes over or not is a different story. But they've got Yabusele as an option. They don't go for it. He takes a lot of threes, and a lot of the threes he takes, they're mostly above the break. Again, like with Gary Trent Jr., that's really not a bad thing. That's fine. He also hits a lot of them. My question, number one, does he fit with Karl-Anthony Towns? Because we're talking about pairing two guys who are challenged defensively, because you would imagine there'd be some sort of overlap. So it's defensive plus minus of 64th percentile for Yabu last year. Offensively, 84th percentile. That's fantastic for a bench player. That's really good. Problem, defensively, 16th percentile. So there's a trade-off here, which is the offense, you can work with it, but then you go into the defense and then you go into the fit with Cat. If Cat weren't on the Knicks, you can see Yabusele making sense. If Cat is on the Knicks, you can see why Yabusele might not make a whole lot of sense. From the salary perspective, you might be thinking, well, shouldn't the Sixers do everything they can to keep him? Maybe not everything, but there are some things that they can do. The problem with the Sixers is that they lucked into the third pick in the draft. That meant that the salary of that player, assuming they don't do any other moves, is going to be higher. Quentin Grimes is in line for a nice payday. Before you know it, the money that would have been carved for Yabusele is suddenly going to Grimes and the third pick, assuming they don't trade out or trade down. It's hard for them to clear salary. There is a window here for a team like the Knicks to say to Yabusele, if Philadelphia is uncomfortable going into the tax to keep you, we're not. We see a value prop here. But then there comes the question of the fit. So that's where there's a real question. And then when you add in one of Brunson or Kolek, if you're running Towns and Yabusele and a guard who really isn't a strong defender, feels like it could be a bit of a train wreck. So Yabusele, I'm a fan, would be very open to seeing him playing in New York, but how he fits on this roster is something worth noting. Now, maybe the Knicks do what we talked about, which is they say, hey, we don't really care about the fit right now. We want to give you money. We want you to excel. And at the deadline, we'll figure it out. Maybe we just wind up keeping him. Maybe we move him for someone who can give you similar value, but you couldn't use the taxpayer mid-level as a trade exception. So you sign that player and then trade them later. You figure it out. That's another option. But looking at the roster as currently constructed, which is what we're trying to do just for this exercise, it's hard to imagine a seamless fit defensively.
I will just ask if you know offhand who Gershon Yabusele's agent is.
I actually don't. I don't.
It's Drew Morrison of the little small boutique agency known as CAA. Drew Morrison also represents our OG Anunoby, Isaiah Hardenstein, a couple other people that have had cups of coffee with the Knicks. Shake Milton, Usman Garuba, I think it was literally the time span of a cup of coffee that I think he was in New York.
He was also Sam Rose, his client.
Yeah,
for whatever it's worth, Garuba.
Yes, and that obviously matters. Look, two things. One, I think in a vacuum, Yabusele is worth $5 million. A 2-year, $10 million flyer or whatever, $11 million flyer.
Yeah.
Like, the guy was out of the NBA for half a decade, and he came in and he showed he's clearly an NBA player. Is he an NBA player that could stay on the floor in the series that we just saw the Knicks play against that offense? I don't know. I don't know. I do know that this guy can fucking score, and that's a skill. Like we talked about Sam Merrill before. Like Yabusele could score. He could put the ball in the hole, and he could do it in a variety of ways. And I wonder whether he would get better in actually some kind of a structured situation as opposed to the clown show that they had going on in Philly this year, or might that be more limiting? I don't know. The last thing I'll say, a guy in this situation who it's like he does enough, I think, to raise eyebrows around the league where it's like, oh, if Philly can't keep him, which again, that's the whole thing. If Philly can keep him, then if Philly wants to keep him, then they'll pay him and they'll keep him. It's a moot point. If Philly doesn't want to pay him, it's like he did enough to raise eyebrows, but like contending teams. First of all, contending teams don't have the wherewithal. Other contending teams don't have any more of the wherewithal than the Knicks really have. And if you really do look at other really good teams, are they going to look at Yabusele and be like, yeah, we have a guaranteed rotation spot for you here? I don't know that the answer to that question is necessarily yes. Mm-hmm. And then if you're a lesser team, are you really going to invest the years and dollars where it's like, yeah, we think there might really be something here. A guy who is like, he's a tweener 4 or 5. He can't really defend at the 5. He can't really, but he's also not like you really don't want him defensively at the 4.
No,
and you don't really
struggles at the 5 to your point.
Yeah. And you honestly, you don't get the most out of the offense at the 4. So it's like, all right, are we giving 30 minutes a game to this guy? Like once upon a time, there were teams out there who might have done that. I don't know that there's any teams right now who would be in that business unless it's going to be like a Washington Wizards team who just figures, hey, let's sign him to the contract and then we'll flip him at the deadline. This guy's we'll play him 30 plus minutes a night. He's going to put up 20 and 10 for us or whatever the hell, and we'll get value. Maybe there's some team like that, but even the crappy teams now, they all have these young players who they want to play and give like real minutes and responsibility to. So maybe he could be available for this amount of money. And if God forbid, like the Knicks, I don't know if this would be a good thing or a bad thing, if they actually went to him and was like, listen, you'll play here. Like you're going to be a rotation player here. Mm-hmm. I would think that would be pretty tempting. Now, I don't know. Again, are they going to be in that situation? We have a lot of runway to go before, July or June 30th, whatever it is. So we'll see. Yeah, it's not the craziest idea. I'll say that. Again, you could do worse for $5.6 million than this guy.
Absolutely. He's of the players mentioned again. I know we went from small to big, so he just happened to be last, but he's the preferred candidate for me for this role. I just wonder about the redundancy with Cat. And do you, first off, assuming Cat's still here, how are you finding players that complement as opposed to overlap, where it's kind of like the similarities that are there? But then there is the question that we need to ask, which is there a world where Karl-Anthony Towns is not on the Knicks? Man. We're not going to do that at this moment, but no. I'm just saying, the only sentence I will say, and then we will not do this, is if he's not, there are things that Yabusele does that are similar, but not nearly the same, because one is an all-NBA player, and the other is being talked about for a taxpayer mid-level exception. So I don't want people listening to get it twisted, but there is something in terms of the offensive presence where there is that similarity. Period. That is the end of my sentence. I will no longer talk about that scenario for this podcast.
I'm not gonna bring up the Cat. I'll stick with Cat being here because at this point I'm assuming that he is going to be here. I don't think that should be dispositive. Again, first of all, regular season's a long time, 82 games. You got to play a lot of guys. Guys get hurt. And if to me, the bet, it would be then if Cat is here, it would be a question of like, all right, what's your starting lineup? Because if your starting lineup is Cat plus Mitch, then And we know from this, well, again, who knows what the rotation patterns are going to be. But like what happened this season, Cat usually went out midway through the first quarter and then comes in at the start of the second quarter, which is part of why his defensive numbers were so great, because it was easier for him to defend against those backup lineups, especially when he didn't have Jalen Brunson on the floor and they ran roughshod over them offensively. Like Cat goes out, maybe Yabusele comes in. And then, maybe then a few minutes later, Mitch goes out and Ariel Haporti comes in. Like you could see it working. You could see it working. You could see a world where it could work. So I like it, man. I like all the candidates. I got to say that I don't think there's one, other than Coffee, who's just not really inspiring to me. Other than Coffee, I think this is really, really I'd be fine with any of these guys.
Yeah, I'd say Coffee and LaRavia, definitely guys that I personally would not expect.
I wouldn't mind LaRavia. Again, the guy's been in the league for 3 years. He was the 19th pick in the draft. He's a good player. Is he a rotation player on a good team? I don't know, but
why are the Knicks the ones to explore that?
Because he's 24 and you're making a bet.
Hakoum Dadier is 19 years old.
Yeah, well, maybe he's not ready yet,
Maybe LaRavia never will be.
Maybe. Look, we could go around and around. These are the sorts of players that, as you said, better as you said at the top, these are the sorts of players you get with this amount of money. You're not good. In all likelihood, you're not getting a guaranteed rotation player. You're getting a guy who might hit in your rotation and a guy who might not.
Agreed. Listen, if I didn't think LaRavia was at least worth talking about, we wouldn't have talked about him. Yeah. But so to put a bow on this, in conclusion, the taxpayer mid-level exception provides an opportunity to add back depth to your team. It gives you the ability to have more than 7-8 deep if you're the Knicks, although, of course, the Knicks might have that. They just haven't experimented well enough to determine that. The Knicks could run it back, add a player with taxpayer mid-level exception, and finish under the second apron. As we've done the math, it is doable. You can find a way to do exactly that. You would just be hard capped at the second apron due to using said taxpayer mid-level exception. The right/best taxpayer mid-level exception target will depend on the core of the roster. Question of who will be on the team next season. That's really where fit will start to come more into play, but this is just talking with some fit in mind, but purely talent. This is just the run it back thing. But if we both agree, hey, the Knicks, and it seems like we do, are not going to run it back, they'll probably do a little bit more than that, maybe a lot more, but we'll see. Then we have to start considering where fit does intersect with the team as a whole.
This was great. Truly, this was really good. I dare I say, in terms of these specific types of conks, where you go through a whole list of players as a target for a specific exception, or back in the day when they actually had money to spend. I think you really nailed the right guys. Because you could make arguments for every one of them. At the very least, you can make arguments for every one of them.
Thank you. Honestly, I was looking at my screen, toggling through the whole time. Didn't even realize that this is going to be longer than the first episode. And I thought going into this, it would be like, oh, it's a breeze to go through these players. And you just get lost in them. You get lost in the reality of those players. I
think there's a lot to dig into. And the only change I would have made, bump Coffee down to the AAA and stick Bruce Brown in his spot, because I'll bet you an old fashioned that Bruce Brown gets less than the taxpayer mid-level.
I'll take that bet.
Okay, there we go. It's on the line. Everybody listening, you can hold us to it. And on that note, Jeremy, anything else before we get out of here?
No, I just really hope Bruce Brown gets paid now. That's it.
No fucking top shelf. This is a standard old fashioned like bullet, or something.
You think I'd take you to the cleaners on that one? No. We'll go mid shelf.
Mid shelf is fine. Mid-shelf. I wouldn't make the bet if I didn't think I was going to win. So I'm pulling for mid shelf.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it for this episode of Cap or No Cap. I really hope nothing batshit crazy happened between when we recorded this and when this is supposed to air. And we will be back. I don't know when we're going to be back. We'll be back soon ish with another episode with me and Jeremy. But it's summer, and again, there's crazy things that happen. So maybe we will hop on, and then that'll, but whatever. You know where to find us. Subscribe to everything if you haven't subscribed to it yet. Like, rate, review, all that stuff. And we'll be back with more funny games before you know it. Peace out.